I don't want to stop the game right now, but it is time to go live on Facebook for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man they call GC because of his genius concepts, because he generates cash flows, and because he's a great co-host, and coincidentally, because his name is Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you today.
And today we have a fascinating guest who's been investing for 14 years. He's been helping hundreds of investors find the right mix of real estate in his portfolio. And recently, he became a bit of a folk hero in his family when he helped his father-in-law go from $0 in the bank to $60K per year in passive income in just under 5 years. He actually had to reschedule today to be with us because he was being casted in the next Marvel movie for superheroes of real estate. And he's been described as the mix of Robert Kiyosaki and Ryan Gosling. And his name is John Blackburn. Welcome, John, to the show.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully we recorded that intro because I'm going to share that with my wife. I think she needs to hear that. That was quality. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That is one of the things we do at the show is we make marriages better. So
I see that for sure.
You gotta get the Not Your Average Investor Show effect. I want to welcome all of you that are joining us today. Thank you. We already got 68 people in the house. We see our community of folks that join with us here. Jake Hargrove with the patented yo, back to you, Jake. John Henning, Lee Bishop, John Evans, Eddie Harris from Atlanta. Good to see you. Rick Margwin. Good to see you. Nadeem, good to see you back, my friend. We got Matthew Purnett. Matthew, I've seen your name around a couple of times. You're a Steelers fan too. Stevie B in the house from the Facebook group. It's good to have the family here together today. All of you that come back often know that this is an interactive show. We know that you know that we want you contributing to it, getting your questions answered here live from John, from Greg, and having me be the conduit to do it. 2 ways to interact. One is you pop open that chat room that you see that is flying through already, getting populated, and you chat with people in there. There's a little trick there. It's defaulted to only speak to John, Greg, and I. So if you want everybody else to see what you're saying, you got to pop open that blue box above where you type and change it from panelists to panelists and attendees. And there's a lot of collective knowledge in this group. So we want everybody sharing and being part of that conversation. And second, if you want your question asked on the air, do me a favor, help me help you by using the Q&A box that you can get to by popping open it's on the bottom right side of your screen. You open that Q&A, and the secret there is that you're going to see the chat flying. I'm going to have a hard time keeping track of all of it. I may go cross-eyed, but if you just pop it into the Q&A, I'm able to just track it and make sure that your question gets asked and we get you on the show. So without further ado, the next move, if you really just want to download the calculator tool on how to calculate investments, how to calculate anything you're doing with JWB, any potential deal you may have, go to jwbroi.com where you download our calculator tool that you can use for anything you'd like. And without further ado, we're going to kick it off here with the interview portion of our show, the star of the show, John Blackburn. John, how did you've been investing for 14 years, which makes it look like you started investing in your teens, right? But how did you... Yeah, close, right? You said you were about 21 years old. How'd you kind of like start with real estate?
Yeah, so one of my best friends from back home in Pennsylvania, he and I were going to college together at Penn State at the time, I think sophomore year, junior year, something like that. And he had just gotten his real estate license. His mom owned a lending company. His dad owned an escrow and title company. And he was like, well, I'll just get my real estate license and we'll be the fearsome threesome. Somehow he talked me into doing it as well. And he and I operated a real estate company for probably 3 or 4 years. He actually still operates it, broker of records, has a super successful business back in Pennsylvania. But that's how it was, driving people around on Sunday, showing them houses and just doing the realtor life. That's how it all started.
That's how it all started. You said that was in Pennsylvania or in Connecticut?
Originally in Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up, small town in central Pennsylvania called Bedford. So there are definitely more sheep than people in that town. And it was an awesome way to grow up.
Sounds good, man. Oh, so at what point did you go from operating a real estate business and doing this to getting into the educating others space? Like what made you want to start teaching other people this game?
Yeah, so I began my real estate career right around when the market fell out. I was graduating college and basically trying to find a quote unquote job at the literal worst time in the economics of the United States in 10 years, which was a blessing and a curse. One, I couldn't find a job, but two, that made me think outside the box. Like, hey, I got this real estate license, what are some other options out there? So I started getting into investing. And at that point in time, I actually moved to San Diego. I said, hey, if the real estate world's going to be in the toilet and I can do this job from anywhere in the United States, I might as well do it somewhere where I don't have to shovel snow, right? So I moved to San Diego and I've been there ever since, last 12 years, I think. And the biggest thing that made me change from not only doing it myself, but also educating was just the sheer thought of people not having access to this, right? I had a platform through Fortune Builders, which is one of the companies that I do business with and work with. And, they had this huge platform of students that were coming to them looking for education on how to change their investment life and career and outlook for their family. And I'm like, hey, I have this experience. I'm successful at it. How can I also give back and make money at the same time? And that was the biggest piece, was I can improve everyone else's life while continuing to improve mine. It's kind of like a win-win across the board.
Totally. And was there ever a moment you got into the game pretty early, right? Like, so in your life, right? In your
Yeah.
career,
Yeah.
was there a moment that it hit you where you kind of looked around and thought to yourself, how don't more people know about this? Like, how are people so undereducated on this powerful mechanism? Like, I feel like I've had the last year of me being co-host here with Greg and learning this stuff has just been this like ongoing barrage of, I can't believe how wrong the rest of the world has it.
Yeah, you kind of feel that way after a period of time. I think I've been surprised so many times about how many people don't, haven't had exposure to the concept of investing in real estate, that I'm not surprised anymore. It's just kind of numb to that process. But for sure, I mean, you know, when you sit back and when you're engulfed in it, like Greg and I are on a constant basis, it's just the language that we talk. It's the life that we live in, if you will. And when we step out of that every now and then, we're still taken back by, oh my God, why aren't more people taking advantage of it, right? Whether it's doing your own investing, like with Greg and JWB team in Jacksonville, it's almost kind of a no-brainer. And, I think that in itself, as an entrepreneur, is kind of, you see this opportunity. Wow, look how many people there are to educate and bring into this crazy world that Greg and I live in day to day. And as you just said, I got into it so young, and I've seen such a massive adjustment and change in my life and my family's life. It's like, hey, everyone else can experience this, right? I started at 20 years old, drinking my way through Penn State. If I can do that, anyone can do it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, man. So all right. So you just mentioned family, right? Like, I think that we definitely want to get into the story of your father-in-law, but how did it take you 12 years of educating other people before you dug kind of like into your old man's story, right? Like, how did that conversation start? Like, how did you, I think your father-in-law seeing you as a guy that can give him financial advice is kind of a big bridge to cross to a certain
Yeah.
extent. How
Yeah.
did you do that, man? It's often so much easier to give advice to people you don't know and have them hear it than it is to give somebody that's so close to you. How did that conversation start? And then give me the story of what you found there.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I was very heavy into investing and real estate when I met my wife. And, my wife and I actually dated for like 6 or 7 years before we got married, right? So by the time before we even got married, we were like, family, and we were all, for all intents and purposes, we were married. But with that being said, you would have to understand and know my father-in-law, John Miller. I mean, he's the most salt of the earth, probably one of the best human beings I've ever met in my entire life. And he has zero ego. And what I mean by that is, he knows what he doesn't know, and he knows what he does know. So if it's in his, I don't know how to do that wheelhouse, he's like an open book and he will, follow directions. He's super coachable and he's very humble. And, that's just kind of like the perfect storm for anyone you want to work with in terms of giving coaching or advice or direction. And, he came to me. He obviously saw what I was doing with investing. He wanted to kind of do more of the active business in terms of flipping and wholesaling and doing all of that stuff. So that's what he came to me for originally, like, hey, would you help me start that? And I did. And, eventually, over a year or two of working with him in that capacity, he's like, hey, I really like to retire at some point, but I don't really understand how to do that. So that's how the conversation started. He was just open and willing to learn and be coachable. And that was the whole catalyst to it all.
Got it. All right. So give me the step one. Give me how did you found him? He had no wealth saved up. Like he had no investments. Did he have some investments? Did you start from absolute zero? What was step one of the advice that you started giving him?
Yeah, great question. So step one is just to give him some backstory. I mean, my father and my mother-in-law are completely blue collar workers, right? Like salt of the earth, your quintessential blue collar workers. Between them, they had, 3 daughters and, live in Connecticut, which is not a cheap state to live in. And if you're blue collar and you have 3 daughters, all your money goes to housing, food, and getting your kids what you need, right? Which is totally great. So at the end of the day, in terms of investing capital, if my father-in-law started this with more than $2,000 in his bank account, I'd probably be surprised, to be honest with you. But he did have determination and he did have the ability to learn and listen. So when we started, it was like, hey, I know there's a way. I don't have any money. How can I get this done? And first step that we did was we sat down and created a plan, right? Here's where I'm at. Here's where I need to get to be. Let's fill in the in-between, right? And the where I'm at is I make about $50,000 to $60,000 a year in income, right? That's where I'm at. That's what I need in order to be able to retire in the future. So I said, okay, that's the plan. How do we get from $0 to $60,000 a year? And then from there, the next steps were looking at his market, making a determination on what are the best type of rental properties that we should be investing in. And then once we figured out those properties, which are 3 to 4 unit properties in Connecticut, once we figured out what the ideal rental property was, it's, hey, how many of those suckers do we have to buy in order to hit 60 grand a year? So we determined we have to buy about 5 to 6 of those. And then we knew exactly how many we needed to purchase. And then it's just going out there and figuring out how to get those properties under contract and doing it with little to no money.
That sounds a lot, Greg. Sounds a lot like your onboarding calls, right? Like you guys go through this just like reverse engineering of where do you need to be? How do we create a buying plan even before you show anybody a property? You want to talk about that, Greg?
Yeah, I'm just sitting back and just enjoying this because I've had the pleasure of helping people in my family go through the same process. And I know how it means so much. And I also know how difficult it is being a younger guy and then helping out people in your family who are a lot older. So kudos to you, John. I mean, that's really special what you've been able to do for your father-in-law. And
Thanks, man.
it does. It all starts with a plan. And, many people, there's just hurdles to being able to invest in rental properties that people have to, help themselves get over. And the first one is just, trying, like getting yourself mentally ready to buy that property. And that's a really tough hurdle for people to get to. Many people, if they get there, they don't stop and say, okay, what's the ultimate goal? What's the ultimate plan? And that's where a lot of people fail. They run right in. If they can get up the courage and the resources to go ahead and start to invest in rental properties, they've got all these other naysayers out there who are telling them they shouldn't be doing it and that they're going to be, waking up in the middle of the night with their tenants calling them for a clogged toilet or whatever. You've got all those naysayers. You put them to the side. You get to the point where you're going to buy rental properties, but you don't actually think about really important questions like why? Why are we doing this, right? We don't often think about how many we need to buy. We talk a lot about at JWB that, the goal here is not for you to buy 1,000 houses. The goal is for you to reach your passive income goal. And if you reach that goal, then you don't need to buy any more houses. if you don't want to. If your goals don't dictate it, and that's a great thing, right? But you never know that unless you actually go through the process that you, John, have just gone through in that planning process. In fact, I think people would really like to kind of know a little bit more about that planning process. John, could you kind of talk about specifically how you determined that? I think, was it 5 or 6 of those that he needed in his portfolio? Could you give people a little bit more insight into how you determined that?
Yeah, for sure. So, Connecticut's a very interesting real estate investment market. To be honest with you, I probably wouldn't recommend investing in Connecticut to really anyone. However, my father-in-law lived there and it just made life super easy. So that's why we invested there. And what we did was we started analyzing some properties, just like you do for all your clients, Greg. It comes ready to rock and roll. But for us, we would go out, we would analyze single units, 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, to figure out what property gave us the best bang for our dollar in terms of cash flow versus cost or purchase price. And to us, it was that 3 to 4 family was the sweet spot. And what we did was we looked at those properties and said, hey, if we were to leverage into these properties, right, and we were to get a loan for 75 or 80% of the actual value of purchase price of the home, what's my end cash flow going to be after I pay my mortgage, my taxes, my insurance, my property management fee, all of that? And we determined that we could usually get about $1,000 a month in net cash flow on a 3 or 4 unit property after we paid all of the costs associated with it. So I knew hey, if I could get 5 to 6 of those from my father-in-law, he could go out and purchase those, then hey, we'd have that 60 grand a year.
That's perfect.
Yep. So that was the process in itself. And I just wanted to mention something you said, Greg, about the fear of, what all could go wrong and whatnot. And I think the older we get, we become more fearful because we've experienced loss and failure, right? I think one of the biggest things that not only I saw as a success as a young person was I didn't know how much risk I was taking, right? I didn't know what all could go wrong. I didn't experience all those issues. I just went for it. And luckily, more turned out better than not. And my father-in-law is kind of that same type of person. He's a kid at heart, total kid at heart. He's like, hey, you know what? If it fails, guess what? It's another learning experience for me. And if it goes great, hell, I don't have to work anymore. And that was just just such a positive attitude and, way to approach it.
I'm always super impressed with people that learn something new late in life, right? I got one of my best friend's dad, learned Japanese in his 70s kind of thing. I'm like, dude, that's incredible, right? That ability to keep the mind elastic and keep evolving is definitely a key for happiness there. So let's talk about the other piece. So you figured out this is where he needs to be.
Yep.
You figured out that he needs this many assets of this type to get there. Mm-hmm. But he still had $0 in his bank account. How did he build up the capital in order to be able to invest, or was it even building capital? How did he acquire these properties when he had no money in his bank account?
Exactly. So in my mind, there's really 2 ways to do rental real estate, right? The way that we all want to do it, which I would prefer to do it 9 out of 10 times a day a week, is the Greg way, right? To call Greg and be like, hey, bud, I need another rental property. And he sends me a list of 10 and I go, that one. And then I just write a check for the down payment and move on. The caveat there is, hey, we got to have the down payment. So if you have the money to invest, quote unquote, truly passively, which is what JWB provides, that's the shtick, because, you're just putting your money somewhere to work for you. My father-in-law didn't have that luxury, right? As I said before, he might have had $2,000 in the bank. So, hey, how do I buy properties? And he's not going to be saving 30 grand or 40 grand a year to put down payments on homes. So we had to get our hands dirty. And this is the not so passive way to invest in real estate, which we would go out and we would look for thrashed 3 and 4 unit family properties. I mean, I think the average renovation we do on 3 units or 4 units is $70,000 to $85,000. So they're big units or big projects, but guess what? We're able to buy these things for 100 grand, 150 grand. We put in 70,000 and then they're worth well over $300,000 when we're done. So we can do all of this work and then what's called the BRRRR strategy, buy, renovate, and then we refinance all of our cash out of it because of the value we've created in the property. And then essentially we purchased and owned that home with no capital into it. So that's how my father-in-law managed to build the portfolio that he has.
The Burr method, man.
The Burr method, you got it.
You know, a lot of folks will ask us at JWB, how did we get started? We started with that exact same process that John just talked about. And if you are an active investor and you want to spend a whole lot of time, money, energy, take on a lot of risk, it is a great way to go about buying rental properties. It comes with some challenges, some risks as well. But at the end of the day, and for those who might not, you know, this might be the first time you're hearing it, what you're able to do is actually buy an undervalued property because you put the time and energy and resources into finding that undervalued property. You then renovate the property, you put a resident in place, and then you can refinance that property out and get all of your capital, sometimes, maybe all of your capital out of the deal. And then you can go on to the next one and then on to the next one. So if you're somebody who is in that place where you want to take on that type of burden, right? You want to be the one who is doing all of that active work and you're willing to take on more risk. This can be a great way to get started if you don't have the capital at the moment.
Yeah, for sure, Greg. And it's one of those things where, you know, it's always a time versus money conversation when we're investing, right? You know, what's more important to us, our time or our money? That is, if we have that option. And, you know, with you, all we have to do is we just know how to analyze properties. As we can analyze a property, then, you know, we can invest in real estate successfully, which is so nice for the average person that has a 9-to-5 or a career or kids or whatever, right? You know, when you're doing the Burr strategy, as you said, it's a super awesome opportunity to acquire properties that you normally potentially wouldn't be able to afford. But not only do we have to analyze them, we have to be able to manage a renovation crew, right? Find lenders that are willing to refinance us, find funding to purchase and renovate those properties. So it takes a lot out of you. But, you know, the upside is that, hey, hopefully we don't have any money in the deal when we're done.
And, you know, many people think that it has to be one or the other. But,
True.
You know, John, you and I, we have so many mutual clients. We see it work hand in hand so well. It's those active clients that are wonderful at what they do in a completely different market that may not work for positive cash flow. And they run their real estate business and they are boots on the ground and they're putting the work in and they're taking maybe additional risk there, but they're there and they're experienced and they know what to do. And then they take their passive money and they might put it with a play in Jacksonville with us here at JWB, and they're building up their passive portfolio. So make sure everybody understands that it's not one or the other. And John, so I'd love to understand a little bit more, kind of maybe more details on how your father-in-law was able to do this and maybe the timeline. Could you tell us maybe kind of where he was after maybe 6 months or after a year or maybe 2 years, whatever you feel like the right milestones are for him to start building this portfolio?
Yeah. So for us, it was a pretty steady process. So in Connecticut, the areas that we invest in, you know, we chose super quality neighborhoods, just like you do, Greg. And, you know, we didn't want to be in, you know, neighborhoods that we would have constant issues and turnover and stuff like that. And the nicer neighborhoods you look in, the more competition you have, the less available inventory. So what my father-in-law did is it was Mr. Slow and Steady. He did about one property a year every year. And one year he did two. So I think he has 6 3 or 4 unit properties now. So one year he did 2, every other year is just 1 property a year, which in my mind is, when I look back, I mean, that's such a doable effort. Like in 12 months, can you find 1 property, renovate it, and put residents in it? I mean, come on, guys, we got 12 months to do that. And all said and done, he makes about $1,000 per property per month and got himself to that point in 5 years, went from $0 in passive income, $60,000 a year in W-2, like earned income, to $60,000 a year in pure cash flow, right? Net cash flow. Plus, he now has a Social Security check. So he actually makes more now than he did while he was working.
And guys, if you have any questions, this would be a great time to fire some of these in. John has not just helped his own father-in-law do this. He's helped literally hundreds of folks do the same exact thing. We share probably hundreds of mutual clients together. And I know there's hundreds and hundreds more out there. So you have a great opportunity to ask some questions for somebody who's implemented a plan like this. I had one question. So I know he started off at a place, I think you mentioned he didn't have more than maybe a few $1,000s of investable capital. So in order to buy that first property, how did he do that? Did he raise private money to be able to fund the purchase and the renovation? Did he buy a $0 down deal? Did he get seller financing? How did he do that first one? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I know how he took each property and went to the next one with the Burr method, but how did he do the first one?
Yeah, great question. And the funny thing is, so obviously I have experience in real estate investing, and I've created contacts with private money lenders, and I could have very easily called someone and said, hey, fund this deal for my father-in-law, and have been done. At the same time, like, hey, let's see what this guy's got in the tank, right? So I made him go out and raise private money. He did it. He got the loan from a hard money lender. I think it was like Lehman One Capital or something. He got the loan, but he still needed that like 20 or 25% in the game. So for like 25 years, he managed the production floor of a hardwood flooring company. And, he became good friends with the owner and actually just went to him and like got the 25 grand or whatever he needed to fund it. So did it all.
Man, that's incredible. Do you remember what terms he gave that private individual?
Probably, I would say 12% and a pointer couple.
There you go. Can you walk people through? So what John's talking about here is his father-in-law went out, raised capital, and paid a really high interest rate, which is what most people would think. He just went out and he said, I'm going to pay you 12% to the hardware store manager friend of his.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to pay you 12%. Could you walk people through why that makes sense to do when many people would hear 12% and they'd be like, I'm never going to pay somebody 12%. Why does that make sense, John?
You're paying for the opportunity to play, right? A lot of people get stuck on just looking at, what am I paying? I'm paying that 12% or 1 or 2 points. And in a bubble, in a room all by itself, that is expensive. But when you look at what opportunity that provides to you, I mean, I remember his first deal that we purchased. We bought it for $125,000. It was a 3-unit building, and we wound up putting about 70 grand in it. So we were all in, call it $200,000. If you look at that property today, it's probably worth $350,000. So, he might have paid 4, 6, 10 grand in interest and loan charges to what? Create $150,000 worth of equity. I mean, I'll write that check all day long.
Yeah. And people in their mind also feel like when you are paying somebody 12% interest, it's almost like they lose the sense of time, right? Because if you're paying somebody 12% interest on your home loan for the next 30 years, that's a bad move, right? You're not going to be doing that. But what John's father-in-law was able to do is to look at this and say, okay, I'm going to be into this renovation on day one. I might be out of this renovation in, I don't know, 3 months. You got pretty big renovations there. 6 months, maybe.
Yeah,
right?
term is about from purchase to actually putting long-term financing into place on the refi. It's about 5 months. So we paid that 12% for 5 months.
So and this is part of the risk, right? You go into this, you're going to take the risk. You're going to make sure that you can renovate this home. You're going to have a timeline on it, right? The shorter that the timeline is, the less holding costs, the less burdensome this 12% really is. Right. If you think about JWB, right, we borrow money, we pay 10%, right? That's a really high interest rate. Well, the only reason that I'm really good with paying 10% interest on hundreds of millions of dollars out there is because we're really good at turning that over, right? 10% is great for the end person who's giving the money and earning the interest rate. But for the person who is using it, if they can flip the money quickly, then 10% or 12% is not so burdensome. And that's really what John was able to show his father-in-law here.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a two-pronged game. One, you're in a situation where, hey, it doesn't matter how much I'm paying because I'm going to make it up. The opportunity it's affording me is huge. And if you pay well, guess what? You're never going to have problems finding money, right? I'll pay an extra percent all day long to keep millions of dollars available for me versus them going to another guy that's paying another percent, right?
Amazing. I love the conversation of seeing money as an opportunity to do other stuff, right? Like it's the whole like rich dad, poor dad conversation, philosophical conversation of just like, are you buying an asset or are you buying a liability? Couple of comments here in the chat, right? Karen Jensen puts in how I wish I had learned this stuff earlier. I'm learning a lot from Daddy now. She's Ken Maline's daughter, who Ken, John, I don't know if you know him, but he is in his 80s. He started investing in real estate with JWB, and in a couple of years, he's built up a nice passive income cash flow. Denise S writes, "Hey, John, FYI, my 3 kids did each decide to start their passive investing income stream now as 20-something-year-olds, and they each have new construction house under contract right now with JWB, trying to teach them the power of compounding and why they need to start now." Very, very cool. Like we love this messaging. Thank you for sharing. We're going to share, right? John has put in a course about exactly the process that he took his father-in-law on, and how if you want to become active at building your passive income stream, we're going to give you great details on John's course that's coming out right now. But for right now, we got some great questions here in the chat. The first one in the Q&A. The first one is from Gregory Stone. He asks, "It sounds like the properties that John's father-in-law purchases have to be actively managed by his father-in-law, or is there some property management company that they were using?" John, is your father-in-law also managing, or did he go about handling the renovation because he's a contractor and then find a property management?
That's actually a great question. And I'm going to encourage anyone, regardless, obviously if you're working with Greg and JWB, they got that management on lock. But if you're doing it on your own, no matter what, move management to a third party. And the reason why is you want to look at yourself as $100 or $150 an hour, job. Like that's what you're worth. And property management is not that, right? So, tenants and toilets is not something you want to deal with. And you do truly want to retire, not pick up phone calls at 2:00 in the morning because someone shoved a potato down a toilet or something of that nature. So always pass management off. Always make sure when you're initially analyzing the deal to build in a property management fee to make sure the numbers still work at the end of the day when you're handing that property off. I'll be quite honest with you, and this is unfortunately the way it is in a lot of markets. If you went to Jacksonville right now and looked around, there's probably not a whole lot of good management companies. There might be one, and that one's JWB, right? And just so you guys know, I own properties with JWB as well. So I'm that guy that does both, properties on my own, properties passively. So I understand what good management looks like. And I actually helped, this is how we went like next level with this process, is my mother-in-law finally had the opportunity to retire. But she had been working third trick, which for any of you don't know, third trick's overnight, like, working in the store overnight, stocking, doing all of those things. And it was just, she was almost 60 years old. She was just beat you up over 25 or 30 years. And she was like, I got to retire. They had an opportunity to buy her out for retirement, but she was like, I'm going to have to get a part-time job because I'm like $500 or $800 short a month to just kind of live comfortably. So there were no good management companies in New Haven, Connecticut. So I proposed to my mother. I'm like, hey, you want to come manage some properties for us? So she makes 8% a month on all of our properties. So she's now making a couple grand a month on managing all of our properties. And, it just became a family affair overnight.
Brilliant, brother. Just bringing wealth creation strategies to the entire family. Who's next?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, hopefully the rest of the family doesn't see this and like, hey, John, can you give me a job?
Note to self, marry into John's family. All right. Yeah, Josh Stanley has a question. Is there a sell-off strategy over time to convert the passive income cash flow into capital gains, or is the plan to let it ride?
For someone of my father-in-law's age, we'll just ride those properties till they become inherited. Yeah, there's no reason. I don't see any reason to sell them unless there might be some huge financial event where they need to be sold, but I don't foresee that ever needing to happen at his age at this point.
Makes sense. Well, do you mind saying why that is?
He's 65, so we might own the properties, another 25 years, hopefully 30 years, maybe if we're lucky. And at that point in time, they'll be paid off. So my wife and I will inherit those paid off properties. And at that point in time, what will happen is when properties are passed on from one generation to the next, this is one thing a lot of people don't understand. There's what's called a step up in basis. So what that means is my father-in-law is all in on those properties for $200,000. If he sold them today, he'd sell them at $350,000, meaning he would pay capital gains on that $150,000. Let's say in 30 years, they don't appreciate a cent, which we all know isn't going to happen. When I inherited the properties, all of this would go away. I would inherit them today at $350,000. I could sell them for $350,000, pay zero in capital gains. And to give you like a bigger idea of what that looks like, I know people who bought houses in California for 75 grand 40 years ago. Their kids will inherit them. They'll be worth $2.5 million. They can sell them for $2.5 million, not pay any capital gain.
Pretty incredible, John. I'm glad you broke that down. We haven't really broken that down here on the show. So
Yep.
I mean, that is incredible. Another reason why you have these incredible tax advantages for rental property investing that you just don't see in other asset classes.
Yeah, totally, man. Greg, didn't Ken Moline bring up something around that kind of subject? I'm not educated enough to know what the difference was.
He did. He was talking about inherited. I think it was inherited retirement accounts, and there were a few other kind of qualifiers there. So we're talking about outside of your retirement accounts here.
Got it.
Yep.
It can get kind of messy when you're talking about all the rules when it comes to retirement accounts and inherited retirement accounts. So that's, if you remember, that's where I was like, well, let's talk to the CPA on that one.
Well, let's get messy because we got some questions about retirement accounts, Greg. Good news, bad news.
Excellent.
Kyle McGrath. Kyle, good to have you on the show,
Hey,
man.
Kyle, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, he says, say someone is nearing retirement around the age of 59 and a half, and they have mixed assets in 401k, stocks, IRA, etc. How can they tap into that without early withdrawal fees to purchase their first REI property with the plan of acquiring a new property every year to get them to their passive retirement cash flow number?
Love it. I work with students all day long that do this with Greg, and it's an awesome process. So if those stocks and bonds and investments are inside of a retirement account, which it sounds like they are, what we'll do is we'll set up a self-directed retirement vehicle, like either a self-directed IRA or something known as a solo 401k. We'll move all or a portion of those funds out of the current retirement account into the new retirement account that we've set up. And the reason why we've set up this new retirement account is because this one allows us to buy real estate. 9 times out of 10, the one you currently have won't let us buy real estate. And then what happens is we create the plan that we had talked about, and then we use this money to go to Jacksonville to buy rental properties. And the reason why we focus on working with someone like Craig and his team is when we're investing, this is the key, guys, when we're investing with our retirement account, it has to be at an arm's length transaction, meaning you can't actively manage your rental properties if it's purchased inside of a retirement account. Technically, you're not even allowed to renovate your own rental properties if they're inside of your retirement account. So by investing with Greg, all of that's off our plate. He's done it all, and it's a arm's length transaction at that point. And that'll get away from early withdrawal things and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're 100% right, John. And just to add to, one of the things that the CARES Act enabled, and, as a result of COVID here, is that there are now ways for you to actually tap into your retirement accounts early and to withdraw up to $100,000 to be able to do that and to do whatever you need to do with those funds. Of course, there are some rules and regulations. You want to look into that. But if you're somebody who has, let's say, $100,000 tied up in a 401k right now, you can actually withdraw that if you follow these rules and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And you have this investable capital there, which the way that John's describing it is putting it into a self-directed custodian, right? That's a process that's always been there, like he's been talking about. We do this on the regular. What I was just talking about is even if you don't take it from your current provider, your current custodian, put it into a self-directed custodian, there may be an opportunity for you to do that as well. Something else to look into is simply taking a loan against your IRA. So there are a number of ways. Many people have no idea that you can actually use your capital in your retirement accounts to invest in alternative assets like rental properties or private lending, but you can, and there's a number of ways to be able to do it.
Yep,
Yeah, that
absolutely.
loan versus IRA is something that reminds me of one of our runs, Greg, when I was kind of like telling you about, like, but do you buy with your retirement account? You're like, that's probably what your father's father told you, right? Like now as I put that together with the idea of, you're willing to give up 12% in order to make 26%, right? Like it's just playing with that fudge in the middle, with not the fudge in the middle, right? But like it's playing with the arbitrage of return of what you can get to do with that money, and tagging it into like a turnkey system that you guys have so dialed in, then reduces the risk of any of that going south. It makes a lot of sense. John, I feel like I cut you off, man. Were you gonna say something?
No, absolutely. I was just agreeing with you. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So we got another question here from Marilyn Cotterman from Homosassa, Florida.
Home of the manatees.
All right. She asks, does your father-in-law have the properties in his name, LLC, or revocable trust?
Great question. So the way that we have it set up is my father-in-law, my wife, and I own the properties together inside of an LLC. And the purpose of that is one, protect ourselves from the liability of the resident in the home. Also, LLC, my wife and I don't take any of the income. So an LLC provides the ability for my father-in-law to take all of the income for himself to use in retirement. And then when the time comes, it'll make the transition to me and my wife much more easy because of the fact that it's all held in ownership under an LLC.
There you go. All right. Lee Bishop asks, was the loan for pay interest only until you refinanced it and paid the principal at the time?
Yes. So in terms of the purchase money to buy the home and renovate it, yes, interest only payments monthly until the loan was paid off. Correct.
All right. Bill Shields asks, how would the process work of paying back a hard money lender for money borrowed for a down payment / closing costs when you purchase the property through JWB? And would a hard money lender do this type of deal for a JWB property?
Cool. You want to take that, Greg?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Bill, I love your question. It just doesn't usually work when you're trying to buy a turnkey rental property. I think that's one of the big differentiating factors for what John and his father-in-law have been able to do. On the active side of the business, you have the ability to find undervalued real estate. You have the ability to create really substantial equity spreads for yourself. But you have you have the ability to raise private money. You've got to do all this other good stuff. You just don't get that when you're going to a turnkey rental property company, right? When you go to a turnkey rental property company, you should think of everything being done for you. It's handed to you on a silver platter, and you get to sit back and just enjoy the benefits of, investing in real estate with everybody else doing the work for you. Specifically about hard money lending, in theory, if you wanted to buy a rental property from JWB, you could come up with a way that you could borrow money. You could raise the money through a hard money lender, in theory. But here's why it wouldn't work, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to cash that money out. There's not an event to basically lower your interest payment. So for you to go out and raise private money, you're probably going to have to pay 10% interest or 12% interest and points on top of that. And there's not that event for you to then go to another bank and say, okay, hey, now I want to drop that from 10 or 12% down to 4% interest. And really, to buy from JWB, one of the main reasons is because it's going to produce positive cash flow. So in theory, it could work for you to be able to raise private money or hard money to be able to buy a JWB property. But we wouldn't sell you an asset if we knew that you weren't going to be able to earn positive cash flow on it. And so it just generally doesn't work on the turnkey space. It's more on the active space, like John was talking about.
Makes
Yeah, what I'll do when I go to buy properties from Greg and his team is I'll just go to a conventional lender which offers, I think right now get a 3.5% interest rate. I have to put 20% down. So 20% of whatever the purchase price of the home is, and just get a nice 30-year fixed mortgage. So I just go straight for the long-term money right out of the gate, because the home's already been purchased, cash flowing, renovated, managed, ready to go.
There you go. John, you bring up something. We haven't talked about your portfolio. What does your real estate portfolio look like? How do you think about where you want to invest and what assets you want to get into?
I've always gone by the mantra of invest in what you know, and I take that very seriously. There are things that I want to invest in, but I won't, because I haven't taken the time, effort, and energy to study it and learn it. And so 95% of my real estate portfolio is going to be invested in real estate. The only investment I don't have that isn't real estate is my insurance policy, because they won't let me invest in real estate. So my portfolio is built up. I would say it's about 60% straight turnkey, like with Greg, 40% do-it-yourselfer. And then in addition to that, I am partners in like large commercial syndications, shopping complexes, and, huge multifamily, like 300-400 unit multifamily estate. So things like that. So that's my major portfolio makeup.
Got it. And in the passive income part of it, right? Like the part that you have in turnkey, I understand that you have some with JWB, some elsewhere. Can you kind of talk through why you make the decision between one or the other? Like is it Jacksonville? Is it the company? Is it?
Yeah. So I don't know if Greg, you agree with this or not, but the word turnkey irks me, because it's just used ad nauseum across this industry. And you go to any city in America and find 15 turnkey rental companies. To me, there should be a more specific definition for the word turnkey, but I will digress from that. I work with really 3 specific teams. One of them obviously being JWB. And the reason why I work with those teams is because they have what's called a vertical line of accountability and a history of being successful. What is a vertical line of accountability? They do it all. They find the house, they buy it, they renovate it, they place the tenant, and they manage it. That means if they do a crappy job of buying it in the wrong neighborhood, or they do a crappy job of renovating it, they're going to have a miserable time managing it, right? So as a management company, you don't want these first 4 to suck. So we're going to make sure it all flows well together. And there are very few companies in the United States that do all of those things together, Greg being one of them. And why do I invest in different markets? Because I want different place. Some markets I invest in will never appreciate, but they're cash cows, right? I'm just getting nice, sexy checks every month and don't have to worry about it. Properties are super cheap. Or I can go to Jacksonville, where Jacksonville's growing exponentially every year. And I know my property value is just climbing every single year. I mean, it's funny because when I bought my properties with you, I have one in Arlington. We can't even buy houses in Arlington anymore because they're so expensive, right? And that was just like 4 years ago or something like that. So, if I look at that and I'm like, man, I won't do it, but I mean, I could sell my property today, probably make 80 grand, 70 grand. And I just bought it 4 years ago, did nothing, right? So, I mean, how fantastic is that?
All right. So I'm hearing the stuff that we talk about, appreciation, and I'm hearing that the value comes in. What's the word, Greg? Vertical what?
Oh man, you just made Pablo's day, John. He and we were running the other day, and he was talking about how passionately it's amazing when you work with partners who are as passionate or more passionate about your success than even you are at that moment. That's the moment that I had with Pablo. He's like, man, Greg, we need to be telling people just how important it is to be vertically integrated. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I hate the term turnkey because of what John just said. I mean, everybody claims turnkey. It can mean a million different things. Pablo's like, yeah, we're vertically integrated. And it goes beyond even just what maybe a normal vertically integrated company may be, right? Because Pablo, and feel free to step in here, but you're talking about, how committed we are to Jacksonville. and how our plans are to make an impact here in Jacksonville. And you see that through some of the things that we're doing with the downtown buildings that we have purchased recently. I mean, that is a reflection of our commitment to the city of Jacksonville, because that stuff is not paying off today. I will tell you that. You don't buy a building that, you know, the buildings that we're about to renovate are going to require $18 million of renovations. Those buildings don't play out in year one from a numbers perspective, or year two, or year three, or year five. You know, but that's the commitment that we have. And then Pablo was talking about all the way on the back end, how, you know, with our charity golf tournament and the home donations that we're able to do, we're empowering the community. We're making the community better. So Pablo, did you plant that with John here when he brought that up, or what? I see you smiling there, just like a proud papa over there.
Listen, I did not, but as soon as he said, you know, as soon as he went vertical with it, I looked at your camera angle. I saw you smiling. I was smiling. I'm like, yeah, this is what's up, man. John, I'm like obsessed with this concept of category design and how much more effective it is to brand yourself as different than better or worse. And from day one of working with Greg, I'm like, what's your category, man? Like, what is the, you know, what is it that we're doing here? And it's gone through a couple of really good evolutions, but that differentiation point seems to me to be the home run. And, you know, it's been a lot of fun to work with these guys
I've beat Greg up for years. I'm like, guys, could you like go to Tampa as well? Maybe like pop over to Georgia, knock some stuff out in Georgia, because Georgia can be a good investment market as well. Just because to be honest with you, I want their management team in those different markets, because I enjoy working with them so well. They've done so well for me over the years. Greg's like, no, man, it's Jacksonville. I'm like, you're going to manage every property in Jacksonville. Then what are you going to do? You're going to have to.
When we get there, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of questions left over, John, but you know, we got a hard stop here at 1:30. We want to respect your time. I want to ask you, so we've talked a lot about this. By the way, any questions that are in the Q&A, our team will reach out to you and follow up. Michael James, that you just reached out to us here on the chat, he's talking about what can he do with about $50,000 to invest today? Greg, I kind of just chatted with him right now that would definitely pick up at least one property with conventional financing, maybe two, or maybe it's one plus private lending. But I highly recommend going to chatwithjwb.com and setting up an appointment with the team, or joining us on Thursdays for when we do the rental income property of the week. And we break down rental income properties and the dollars and cents. Anything to add to that, Greg, as far as a recommendation, Michael?
You nailed it.
Okay. I'm going to put that in the chat for you, Michael, as soon as I'm done yapping over here. But John, we talked a lot about this idea of passive versus active, building up passive income. And you're clearly a wealth of knowledge on all of this stuff with a lot to give. And, you know, you shared with us that you've been working on a course for those people that, you know, don't have the capital yet, aren't ready to just go fully passive with Greg Cohen. I would love for you to tell me a little bit about this course that you put together, how we can find it, kind of what you saw out there that made it obvious to you that this product needs to exist.
Absolutely. I mean, there were kind of like two things that really hit me in the face when it came down to creating this course is one, seeing the process that my father-in-law went through, the questions that he asked, the roadblocks that he had, and the help that he needed. That's the ultimate basis of what this program is built on. The name of the program is Rental Property Pro. Is, hey, you know, I've been doing this for 14 years. So adding my expertise plus this complete novice and the process he had to go through to be successful. What are the things that I would be blind to because of my experience? He wasn't blind to. So I incorporated that into it. It's essentially every single question that he asked, every single resource that he needed, every single thing that was ever incorporated into that process of getting him retired. In addition to, you know, I felt probably 600 investors buy about 1,700 rental properties over the course of the last decade. So I've answered a lot of questions and had a lot of conversations. So it's the combination of all of that. And number two is had to make it, you know, something that was really attainable for everyone, because I know if I look at my father-in-law's position where he was at when he started, you know, he couldn't pay 40 grand to get direct coaching with someone, right? You know, he could maybe spend $1,000 or something like that. So my goal there was to say, hey, no matter who you are, you can get in here and you can utilize the education and you can attain the same results. So it's just based on his experience and my experience on growing a rental property portfolio.
I love the context of the viewpoint from the expert and the viewpoint from the novice, right?
Yeah.
Like we talk about it a lot on this show, that one of the things that works is that I don't know anything about rental properties. So I'm able to ask these questions and bring up these points that normally, maybe if just you and Greg were talking, nobody would be that voice, right? Like I call myself the noble fool. I'm going to stop short of calling your father-in-law that, but the viewpoint of seeing it from a brand new angle and then pairing that with an expert that has been teaching this thing, I think is the perfect combination, and is generally missed by most people that are putting out these informational products. They've been so deep into what they're doing for 15 years that they just take some stuff for granted, man. So I love the perspective.
Yeah. Once you have experience, right? Like Greg and I, we already start on step 8, right? And my father-in-law is on step 1. He's like, whoa, how did you get there? Right. And that's the what I appreciate the most is like, he told me to slow down and talk about step 1 through 7, and then also include 8, right? That was the purpose.
Where do we find it, John? Do you already have a website for it?
Great question, guys. So it goes live on Friday. It's brand spanking new. I put the finishing touches on it. I started sharing it with friends and family up to this point. It's basically been a year in the making. I put my heart and soul into it. And my goal was, I was just talking about with Greg before the call, was the whole purpose is to underpromise and just also blow people's minds. So for all new people that are potentially interested or want to do it, I'm going to probably do something that that's going to take a lot of my time. But for new students, I want to be able to help you out as much as possible to make sure everyone who enters has as much success. So let's just work together one-on-one to talk about the program and what you got. So just do this, just email me and I'll connect with you one-on-one. The best way to reach me is John, John, at rentalproppro.com.
All right. I'm putting this here in the chat for anybody that wants to take advantage of that, John. Man, we ran out of time here and we still have like a bunch of open questions, but to me, that's a sign of a really, really valuable conversation that we're having. We had over 90 people on with us on the call. We really don't take it lightly that people take, their time and their day. We'll have the team get back to you on the questions that you haven't answered, but I really want to thank you for being here, man. I learned a lot on what it is, what the journey is of how you take this idea of not starting with capital to get to the point where you can invest with a JWB and make it truly passive. That's something that I was really opened up my mind to, like, dude, what am I doing? Like I need to go out there and renovate something once a year myself so I can continue adding to this. It sounds really, really approachable. I'm very much looking forward to your course. I want to encourage anybody to before I give it, to Greg for the final word here. Number one, go to jwbroi.com if you want a tool to calculate all these deals and anything that you're looking at and compare things apples to apples as you're going into this journey and you're analyzing properties. Check that out. I'd love to have y'all join us in our Facebook group, jwbfacebookgroup.com. We're almost at like 2,400 people, right? Like 2,300 plus people. It's kind of like this chat that happens just 24/7 and people sharing advice. So we'd love to have you in there, and we'd love to have you on Thursday when we do the JWB Rental Income Property of the Week. And what we do is we just get really, really tactical, right? Breaking down a property in JWB's inventory, how all the numbers work. It's for those of you that were asking these tactical questions, they're going to get answered there in spades. And we really just, the moment you start with questions, we go for it, right? Today we needed to get into John's genius. So like Thursdays is much more about you. Today was, 2 parts John, 1 part you, but we love having everybody on board. I'm just happy to be a part of it. Greg, I'm going to leave it with you for last call here, buddy.
Man, what a great call, John. Thank you for bringing the A game, brother. This was really cool. I mean, I think for a lot of our shows, we're really hoping to bring somebody on with your credibility, with your experience, and then match the theory with the actual application. And I think that is what made this show stand out. Really cool to see your father-in-law's success. I know that means a lot to you. It means more probably than any other deal that you've done, any other rental property.
For
right?
sure.
That means a lot. So thank you so much for being here. want to encourage everybody to go and check out the course when John makes that available. I had the chance to get in there and see a sneak peek. I was blown away by all of the wealth of information there with a lot of the video trainings and whatnot. So highly encourage you. There's no better person to learn from than John. So with that, John, really appreciate you being here and can't wait till you're on the next time, brother.
Hey man, I was just gonna ask, do I get an invite back? Because this was really fun.
Pablo's like Simon Cowell, so I don't know. I mean, I'm like, what's the guy, Randy Jackson? He was the pushover guy. I'm the pushover. I don't know if Simon Cowell over there is giving you the thumbs up or not.
What is it like a check mark or an X or something like? Yeah, you're invited, man. This was awesome, dude. This was a lot of fun. You're invited to come back. John, this was your first podcast, right? Like that's something that we didn't tell people, right? This is your first podcast. You're officially invited to my podcast, Chief Executive Director. I'm going to send you a link for that. We're going to make it 2 in a row, and I'm going to introduce you to people that I know if you want to get on more podcasts and promote.
I'd love it. Let's do it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. All right. See you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.